Welcome, everyone, to our latest episode of the Content Circle of Life webinar series from Comcast Technology Solutions. My name is Paul Claussen. I'm a product manager with CTS, and today I'll be moderating a discussion on the future of contextual advertising, an emerging tactic in targeting contextual brand-aligned advertising and the technologies that enable it. I'm joined in this discussion today by three outstanding panelists in advertising technology. We have with us today Bob Bress, Vice President and Head of Data Science at Freewheel, Dan Cohen, Director of Product and Advertising Innovation at Sky Media, and last but not least, Faisal Ishtiaq, Director of Machine Learning, Media Analytics and AI Platforms Research at Comcast. So to kick this off, I'll start with you, Dan. We've heard a lot in the industry about how the cookie is crumbling and privacy regulations are impacting ability to target advertising. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's challenged Sky and how changing privacy regulations have impacted Sky's approach to targeting advertising and how contextual advertising is becoming a part of your tool set?
Sure, no problem at all. The interesting bit around the regulation from our point of view is that we've always held ourselves to a really high standard. We are genuinely protective over individual customer identity and want to make sure that the data we use for targeting or for our advertisers to do targeting is of the highest possible quality. Luckily, we're in a pretty good position as we know who our customers are because they have to pay us every month, so we know they're real. And we also, from the various platforms we've got, understand what they're doing. We know what they're watching. We know what their behavior is like on the platform. So we're in a pretty unique position in the market. What we actually do is we then kind of load in a load of third-party data on top of that and actually offer something like 1,000 different ways of targeting customers in the market. But we do know that regulations are getting tighter. They're impacting us, so they're impacting everybody. And understandably so, right? People are more concerned around personal data and how it's being used than they ever have been before. And we absolutely have to respect that and have to lean into it. And we really try to do that as best we possibly can. What you'll start to see, I believe, across the market is very quickly you'll start to see which of these data sets that people are out there selling are genuine and which perhaps might be a little bit murkier, which the kind of various regulations like GDPR will start to sort out. That produces some real challenges for some products in the market and some people in the market. But for organizations with high quality data, such as us, I believe, it becomes much, much more important and actually gives us an advantage. What you've actually got to do then is try to build on that capability and make that better. And with contextual metadata becoming an even stronger data set in the market, we're able to really kind of land that as well, because you don't need that personalized data. You don't need to be able to understand exactly who someone is because it's more about the placement of it. So when you put the contextual metadata together with kind of high quality kind of consumer data, you can really meet and exceed the expectations that advertisers have and that brands have. And it's the old mantra, right? Getting to the right audience at the right time is an absolute must. And putting those two together, contextual and that new contextual metadata that is now available really, really helps to land that for advertisers.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So Bob, Dan spoke about meeting the audience where they are and somewhat being data driven and having the data available. But how are ad decisioning tools and global marketplaces like the ones Freewheel serves evolving to meet the changing regulatory landscape? And how are your customers asking you to help them to meet that challenge?
Yeah. Well, I think what we're seeing is ad tech platforms across the industry are all investing more in technologies and processes that ensure data is protected. And some of this is, due to new recent regulations such as GDPR in Europe, CCPA in California. But more than that, I think all industry players are expecting a future where there's going to be increased restrictions around how data is used. And so with that, we're seeing more uses of advanced data technologies, right? Things like clean rooms, decentralized blockchains, federated learning. These are becoming common parts of discussions around how companies within the ecosystem are working together. So advertisers are really looking to find ways to drive the effectiveness of their advertising while ensuring their data is protected. And so, some of these new technologies that are allowing for this are, we're seeing increased use of first-party data, first of all, but also leveraging new technologies such as AI technologies that can generate metadata that we haven't had before that we could use for targeting purposes. And this could include things like how we target video content, especially for premium video.
Cool. Thanks, Bob. All right, so Faisal, next turning to you. What alternative technologies has Comcast been investing in? Bob mentioned utilizing AI to provide data that perhaps we haven't had before. How has Comcast been investing in technologies to provide that data for contextual targeting, and why?
Sure. So AI has been on everybody's mind. Last couple of years, AI is the transformational technology that people had hoped, and it's turning out to bear a lot of fruit. And so within Comcast, we have actually been working in AI for the last decade. We've had multiple products that are in customers' hands today that are based off of AI and machine learning, and we're bringing more to market. Now, what we've done is contextual advert targeting is something that is really opening the door for a better understanding of how do we target our ads to content. And so when we look at the word contextual, that's where AI and machine learning and many of the generative AI technologies now can come into play, and we can bring to bear a lot of understanding of what's happening inside the media itself. And by understanding what's happening in the media, marrying that up with third-party data, but also first-party data, but also external sources of data through, for example, large language models, we can bring a lot of understanding about what's happening within the content, moment by moment, scene by scene, to better contextualize the setting, the objects, the context, a whole gamut of understanding of what's happening in the media so that we can better target and better bring AI advertisements that can really allow for the lift that contextual targeting promises.
Great. And would sentiment be an example of some of the additional data that you can bring in context?
Absolutely. So there is a whole gamut of signals that now we are able to extract from the media itself. And they can range from objects and logos and scenes and understanding of who's standing where, but also more semantically interesting concepts such as what is the sentiment of the conversation? Are they talking about a particular car in a great way, or perhaps in less than a great way? Are they happy? Are they sad? What are the emotions being expressed? What are the nuanced pieces of information that perhaps traditionally in the past we may not have known about, but now we're able to bring in? We can understand what's happening in the audio. Are they screaming? Are they happy? Are they sad? We can understand what the position of objects are relative to the scene. The greater depth of scene understanding, for example, where we can say, look at this, there's a great sofa here. There's a great set of tables here. This is very much related to a nice furniture scene. Perhaps that might be a contextual signal that somebody can utilize.
I think the sentiment is the key differentiator, isn't it? That's the bit that's moved us on from, where people have been for the last 20 years, targeting by genre or subgenre or whatever it might be. Once you're able to get into that next level of detail, add in positive, negative, and many other sentiments, you can really start to land a brand's message, because that's where brands want to be affiliated to. They want to be next to, positive, next something that's going to have a positive reflection on their brand. So sentiment is hugely important, and I think has been probably the big step change that's happened over the last couple of years.
Absolutely. And just continuing on that point, Dan. So when we're talking about brands and ad agencies, how are you seeing their thinking evolving to take advantage of the additional context and data points that we have, and how are they evolving their campaigns, and what are they demanding from Sky in terms of being able to position campaigns?
I think you have to look at the kind of wider market as a starting point with this, right? The market is far more complex, far more fragmented than it's ever been before. There's so many players out there trying to get kind of that advertising pound or that advertising dollar into kind of their hands. What we're seeing more and more is the push towards performance advertising as well. So not just worried about brand, but worried about performance, which has obviously been a key player in the digital area, but not so much in kind of TV platforms and that kind of thing. So we're seeing a lot of that coming in. And what that means is that the data used to plan a campaign and measure a campaign becomes even more important, right? Because that's what's going to drive the best return on investment for a campaign. So the better the quality of your data, the more likely you are to drive good performance. And the best way of doing that is to get the right person and the right time, right? So right person, audiences, been around for a long time, although it's, I say that from a UK market perspective, and, we've been doing kind of a lot of really good work in that area for a long time now, but there are many parts of the world where that still isn't a huge thing, and context and genre is kind of still the main play. But this new form of contextual metadata is really enabling us to add that kind of second part, to add that context and that feeling and that placement alongside the audiences. I mean, I was buying adverts 20 years ago and we were doing it. You did it by genre, by program and that kind of stuff. But if you're able to really do that precise targeting and the precise contextual metadata, bring that together, you're only going to produce better campaigns. You're only going to produce better returns. And that's what advertisers want. That's what agencies want, because that then brings more revenue into the entire industry and better performance for all the brands.
Right. So, Bob, Dan mentioned the right place at the right time and bringing that together. That's really part of Freewheel's job globally, isn't it? Bringing the data from the content and the campaign objectives. So how are Freewheel's customers responding to that and responding to brand alignment within content?
Yeah, great question. I mean, when you look at what advertisers are trying to accomplish when they advertise in premium video, they want to make sure that their content is airing in a way that's consistent with their brand values and their brand identity. And so, at the same time, right, technology and automation is expanding the volume of programmatic advertising opportunities, right? So we can do more in a sort of data-driven, automated fashion in terms of how advertising is driven. And so advertisers want to take advantage of this automation and the cost efficiency that comes with it, but they still want to have a level of control over where their ads are airing, right? They want it to be in something that's consistent with their brand and that they're comfortable with. Now, the new programmatic technologies that Freewheel brings to market really seek to increase, not only the automation, but our ability to give the advertiser a high level of control over, where their ad airs. And, one of the ways we do that is through the use of data, and certainly data around content that gives us a deeper understanding of the nature of that content, enhances our ability to provide deeper levels of automation and understanding of how these ads air, right? So, the AI technology that generates this metadata is providing unique capabilities to bring greater advertising efficiency in terms of process, but also giving the advertisers a deeper understanding of the content in which their ad airs. You want to not just hit the right audience, but you want to hit them in the right frame of mind so that they're receptive to the advertising campaign that you have. One of the ways Freewheel is also looking at this is, we've stood up a Freewheel Viewer Experience Lab, which really seeks to understand, how humans respond to different viewer experiences in terms of how advertising is playing into, different platforms. And the insights that we gain from this viewer experience lab are really going to drive how we use these new AI technologies and AI generated data to drive a better experience, for viewers across the board.
Interesting. So, Faisal, from the machine learning standpoint, how can AI and ML be used to determine context, like Bob was just mentioning, accurately for brand alignment? I mean, it's somewhat subjective, isn't it?
It is, and it used to be harder. However, now when we look at machine learning and we have the AI capabilities in-house today, and we pair it up with some of these generative AI technologies where we are able to better understand the nuanced sentiments and nuanced understanding of content. We have the ability to better understand what that subjectivity used to be in people's minds or in brands or advertisers' mind, and try to craft that into AI solutions. So when we look at video, for example, when we look at media and content, we are extracting a lot of information from that content. And some of it, which I talked about, or we talked about a little bit earlier, for example, specialized objects, and whether logos are there, or whether particular objects are in the scene, faces, people, places, things, looking at sentiment, of course, looking at emotions. We look at 5 different aspects of emotions. And by doing that, we're able to extract a lot of these signals, whether the audio is indicating something, the background audio is indicating a happy scene or a sad scene or a tense scene. What that allows for us to do is to take all of these signals. And so we're now generating a large swath of signals, and in some cases, dozens of signals. And we can then bring those signals in and try to make understanding of it. And we do that by using AI and machine learning to take all of these understandings and point specific understanding. There's an object here, there might be an audio there may be a sentiment, positive or negative, expressed here, there might be happiness here. But then when we start to fuse it all together, that is where the magic starts to happen, which is we can start to say, oh, by the way, this item or these sort of brands or these set of, for example, categories of advertisements would be very relevant to this segment of the video, because of all these signals that previously were very rudimentary. However, in the last 5 years, they've really come to the fold, and we're taking advantage of them. And this is how we are able to better contextualize the scene for brand alignment.
Great. So, Dan, Faisal just mentioned the data and the machine learning getting to accuracy, but there's also there's a question about scale, right? Advertisers need to know that there's enough data out there about a large enough body of content, and platforms like Skies need to be able to process all of the content to provide that data. So, in terms of getting to scale with Contextual, having both the inventory and the buy side interest, how do you see what's your crystal ball telling us about how that's going to play out in terms of getting to the scale on both the inventory and the buy demand?
So, as I kind of said, in a number of ways, we don't need to persuade people that they should be interested in understanding the context that that they should be placing their ads in, right? Because we've been doing it for years and decades. But this is kind of a new story, and we need to convince people it's not the emperor's new clothes. And I think that should be relatively simple once we get going, right? Once we're able to go, this is what we can provide. This is the level of metadata we can get to. This is the type of sentiment, and this is the result that it can provide to your campaign. And when they see that is going to drive increased performance, increased return on their budgets, scale will come naturally. That's kind of my view on it. And you can get that ability to match that with the right audience and bring it all together. Should really, really bring lots and lots of new opportunities to existing advertisers and bringing new people into the market. And I think that's going to be one of the key bits here, which is that placing that context around the right sentiment is going to be really, really important for certain advertisers. So I think there's a really big opportunity there. But you're right, you need to be able to drive absolute scale through a campaign. It can't just be a subset of your content. It has to be thousands and thousands and thousands of hours worth of content with probably millions of bits of contextual metadata. And when you tie all that together, you'll be able to bring the demand in. But there's no doubt there's interest in the market. We hear it all the time. And I think it's going to be a really exciting area over the next few years.
So you need accuracy and scale in production to make all of that happen. It sounds like. So
you know me, Paul. I want everything immediately. So that's how it works.
Yep, I understand. So Bob, what is getting to that scale and that maybe the customer's first contextual campaign? What does that look like for Freewheel's global customer base, and how does Freewheel enable that campaign when the data becomes available? How do you enable that pulling it all together, as Dan says, and taking advantage of that scale?
Yeah. Well, Freewheel really looks to provide an interoperable environment that allows buyers to connect to the right data and suppliers that help them meet their campaign goals, right? Whatever those may be. And so we will work with companies across the ecosystem to enable that. So we've worked with companies like GrapeShot and ComScore to enable contextual targeting segments within our platforms. And we continue to explore other opportunities to enable contextual targeting at scale, as they become available. We're also seeing that a lot of platforms and programmers are really starting to lean into this idea of contextual targeting more. And some of them are really looking to establish a reliable data set against their content to allow buyers to get better insight into the content in which their ads would be airing. So the key for these sell side players, I think, is as they go about establishing these data sets that are going to allow for contextual targeting, is to represent that data with transparency, right? How it's generated, what the meaning of the data is. I think what you don't want to do is put buyers in a position where they're risking targeting a campaign in the wrong content. And so having transparency around that data and sort of a clear understanding of what it represents is key. And it will allow the buyers to take advantage of this latest technology. I think the other thing that sellers really should look to do is just highlight the key benefits of this data, right? We have increased targeting ability as a result of this data. This is data that has not existed before, a more detailed understanding of the content than we've ever had a data set on before. And just the capabilities that come from these data sets that allow, for a deeper understanding of where ad campaigns are airing. So I think it's just a great opportunity for those sellers that lean into it, and I think we'll see increased use there.
Great, thanks. So Faisal, Bob mentioned having additional data, and we've spoken quite a bit on this call about AdWords, and we've talked a little bit about sentiment. What other signals are important or useful that can be mined out of the application of AI and ML?
And ML opens up a lot of applications, and they range from, understanding to workflows and automation. And so there's a large gamut of solutions that are being enabled using AI, and in the media industry, in the media space. We do it ourselves with our video AI offering, where we're able to offer contextualized understanding of your content or content that's coming into the system. We're also able to look at, if where the cue points are for DAI, and if the cue points don't exist, we have the ability, by this deep level of understanding, to identify where potential good advertisement positions may be, and that takes into account both sort of the technical aspects of the video, but also the contextual aspects, so that we can say, not only this might be a good point to put an ad in, but here's the most relevant, for example, brand or categories of brands, or categories that may be relevant for that placement point. Bob mentioned, in terms of the data, to make it relevant, but also to make it very clear and concise. And so one of the things that's important is the concept of relevancy, where just because you see something and perhaps the sentiment is positive does not necessarily mean that may be the most relevant aspect within that segment. For example, there may be 5 different concepts being talked about, or there may be 5 different ad categories that may come up within a 10-minute segment. How do you understand which one's the most relevant? And that's where more of the signals and the AI understanding of both the content itself, but also information about the content, where we're looking at genres and we're looking at, for example, external sources of data. Those all come in to inform the relevancy of what particular ad categories might be. When we look at being able to be, clearly, articulate why was that relevant, that goes to, for example, the concept of AI explainability, where we have to be very clear in saying this brand or this IAB category or this category of AdWords were important because of these signals that we saw in the video. And when we combine the signals, this is why we believe that the relevancy is 90%, for example. And so there are quite a few applications that get enabled in the advertisement space, understanding where the ads are, understanding where potential ad points may be, understanding the contextual relevance of those ads. Those are all things that come to bear, and that's something that, in fact, in Comcast, we are enabling with video AI.
Thanks, Faisal. So I'd like to do just kind of a lightning round with our panelists here. One final question of, as you look forward and you pull your crystal ball out and look at 2024, what do you see as the most important developments in 2024 around contextual techniques and where we're going? And any final thoughts that you might have on this topic? So Dan, we'll start with you, Bob, and then Faisal.
So for me, it's being able to get that balance of within that contextual metadata, understanding both what and how people are feeling. I think that's really, really vital. I think that we need it at scale. I think it needs to be cost effective. And the reason I say cost effective is we don't quite know how much money in the market there is for this. We think there's money that people will say they want it, but we don't know if that's new money or that's kind of money that's coming out of other targeting capability. So we need to make sure that if we're able to deliver this, we're able to deliver it in a way that we can really land it in market and kind of drive that demand, as well as kind of taking in the incoming demand as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing over the next few years is sort of the perfect storm for contextual targeting. On one hand, you're seeing a changing regulatory environment. On the other hand, you're seeing advances in AI that are allowing us to create, better quality data that gives us deeper information on the context of video. And so between the two of those, I think you're going to see increased attention in the space. Buyers and sellers are going to look to get ahead of any sort of increased data restrictions that are coming down the pipe, number one. But number two, even without that, the ability to understand how your ad is airing in content on a deeper level, and to be able to put your ad in the right brand safe environment in a data driven way is powerful, right? So I think we're going to see more folks leaning into that. The amount of data that's going to be available, and Faisal mentioned a lot of it, is going to increase in volume and quality, right? So between the two of those is just opportunity. We're going to be able to do things we haven't in the past, such as not just target the right shows, but target the right ad pod, right? Down to like the content surrounding that ad pod, which is going to be powerful. Brands just are going to have a deeper level of control over how their ads are airing that they haven't had. And it's just going to provide greater scale for automated and targeted ad buying.
Awesome. Final word from Faisal?
Well, I think it's fair to say that having a crystal ball in the AI world these days is like trying to catch an accelerating train. Who would have imagined that ChatGPT would have been on everybody's tongues in 2023, back in a couple of years ago, or even in 2022? Aside from folks who knew, it's taken the world by storm. And large language models are something that are going to be more and more important. And being able to bring the data that we're generating for contextual, for example, and all those signals into these large language models to have a more nuanced but yet accurate and efficient way of extracting contextual information. I feel like that's where we're going to be headed, and that's where the industry is going to be headed.
Okay, thank you. Well, that brings our session for today to a close. I want to thank our panelists for their insights, inspiration, and participation today. Thanks to our audience for watching, and please be on the lookout for future Content Circle of Life webinars from Comcast Technology Solutions. Have a good day.